This is the Booker International Prize Longlist. I'll go through the books one at a time in a moment, but first, what is with all the fruits and the table settings? It feels kind of like a personal jab when I said the size of the Women's Prize Longlist feels like a full meal and I didn't want no Diet 13 book long lists. Well played, Booker Prize. Well played. Anyway, the big news is 13 new to the prize authors, which means the Impasium and We Do Not Part missed out. That's a big surprise to me, but never judge a book prize longlist by the books that missed out. Personally, I got 3 correct: Reservoir Bitches, Hunchback, and On the Calculation of Volume. And there were 3 other books on my radar that I didn't go for: Eurotrash, Solenoid, and Under the Eye of Big Bird, which means that half the long list are books that I was either completely unaware of or that I didn't give the required amount of attention to, which is a really pleasant surprise. A couple of the things I really look for is 2 first-time languages represented in Romanian and Canada. Every time I say that language, it feels like I'm saying the country in North America and not the language in southern India. I love seeing diversity of languages and books from places and cultures. It's not always easy to read about due to just plain availability of literature. The other languages represented are 3 books from French, 2 from Japanese, a Dutch, Italian, German, Spanish, Danish, and Arabic book. We've got an African, a Middle Eastern, a South American, a Mexican, and an Indian author. And if you want to include translators, we have more nationalities represented than books. With a 13 book long list, this is the kind of diversity that I look for and that I was really hoping for. We also have 11 independent publishers represented, which, when you consider the long list is 13 books and Other Stories has 2 books on the long list, that means there's only 1 book by a big 4 publisher. Wow. And I think that's both a good and a bad thing. Obviously, I love that the prize has highlighted what is almost a who's who of small publishing houses. And I think it just goes to show how good the work that they're doing really is. But it also might be an indicator that the big players with all the marketing money are not really interested in translated literature, which I think we all know is actually true, and it's such a shame, such a shame. Hopefully the publicity means more money for the little publishers and they can continue doing their excellent work, but with more resources and highlighting more authors. So my macro analysis of this long list is that I'm really happy with it. And now let's dive into the books and see if that stays the same. A Leopard Skin Hat. This is a story of intense friendship between the narrator and his close childhood friend Fanny, who suffers from profound psychological disorders. Hailed in La Pointe as a masterpiece of simplicity, emotion, and elegance, a series of short scenes paints the portrait of a strong-willed and tormented young woman battling many demons, and of the narrator's loving and anguished attachment to her, a poignant depiction of the bewildering back and forth between hope and despair involved in such a relationship, while carefully calling into question the very form of the novel, written in the aftermath of the death of the author's little sister. A Leopard Skin Hat is both a celebration of a tragically foreshortened life and a valedictory farewell. Playfully calling into question the form of the novel sounds like an excellent book for a type of reader who isn't me. But the rest of that description sounds fantastic. A book I can definitely see going either way. On a Woman's Madness. A classic of queer literature, as electrifying today as it was when it first appeared in 1982, tells the story of a courageous black woman trying to live a life of her choosing. When Noeka's abusive husband of just 9 days refuses her request for divorce, she flees her hometown in Suriname on South Africa's tropical northeastern coast. for the capital of Paramaribo. Unsettled and unsupported, her life in this new place is illuminated by romance and new freedoms, but also forever haunted by her past and societal expectations. A tentpole of European and post-colonial literature, and amid tales of plantation-dwelling snakes, rare orchids, and star-crossed lovers, it is also a blistering meditation on the cruelties we inflict on those who disobeyed. Great to see an author from Suriname, just anywhere in the bookish realm. This novel sounds great, but it's getting a lot of mixed reviews online. My favourite being, I have no idea what just happened, but it left me with a lot of questions to think about. And I think we've all read those sort of books before, and sometimes we've loved them, and sometimes we haven't. Heart Lamp. 12 stories that exquisitely capture the everyday lives of women and girls in Muslim communities in southern India. These portraits of families and community tensions testify to Mustak's years as journalist and lawyer, in which she tirelessly championed women's rights and protested all forms of caste and religious oppression. Written in a style at once witty, vivid, colloquial, and moving, it's in her characters, the sparky children, the audacious grandmother, thug brothers, the oft-hapless husbands, and the mothers, above all, surviving their feelings at great costs, that Mustak emerges as an astonishing writer and observer of human nature, building disconcerting emotional heights out of a rich spoken style. She has garnered both censure from conservative quarters as well as India's most prestigious literary awards. This is a collection sure to be read for years to come, and it might be read for years to come, but it won't be read by the common reader until the 8th of April. I wish the Booker Prize wouldn't do this. It's unfair to readers who just can't get arcs. And it runs counter to the purpose of a book prize to continue to do this. Perfection, a taut, spare, sociological novel about the emptiness of contemporary existence, scathing and affecting in equal measures. Millennial expat couple Anna and Tom are living the dream in Berlin, in a bright, plant-filled apartment. They are young digital creatives, freelancers without too many constraints. They have a passion for food, progressive politics, sexual experimentation, and Berlin's 24-hour party scene. Their ideal existence is also that of an entire generation, lived out on Instagram, but outside the images they create for themselves, dissatisfaction and ennui burgeons. Their work as graphic designers becomes repetitive. Friends move back home, have children, grow up, and attempt at political activism during the refugee crisis proves fruitless. And in that picture-perfect life, Anna and Tom feel increasingly trapped, yearning for an authenticity and a sense of purpose that seems perennially just out of their grasp. This sounds very old school with a touch of Russian nihilistic influence. The reviews of this one are just all over the place too. Some people loving it, some people hating it. And you can almost see why in this little write-up. I can see two completely different books. One that I'm very interested in and one that I am completely bored by. And I guess it's possible that we're getting a little bit of both. I really don't know what to make of this description. Eurotrash. A jaded writer takes his spiky mother and her ill-gotten wealth on a road trip in this tragic comedy and absurd semi-autobiographical novel. Realizing he and she are the very worst kind of people, a middle-aged man embarks on a dubious road trip through Switzerland with his 60-year-old mother, recently discharged from a mental institution. Traversing the country in a hired cab, they attempt to give away the wealth she has amassed from investing in the arms industry, but a fortune of such immensity is surprisingly hard to squander. Haunted in different ways by the figure of her father, an ardent supporter of Nazism, mother and son can no longer avoid delving into the darkest truths of their past. Eurotrash is bitterly funny, a mirror cabinet of family and historical reckoning. The pair's tragicomedy quest is punctuated by the tenderness and spite meted out between two people who cannot escape one another, intensely personal and unsparingly critical. Eurotrash is a disorientatingly brilliant novel written by a writer at the pinnacle of his power. This is yet another book getting mixed reviews that I both really want to read and really want to avoid. How have the judges found so many books with divisive and conflicting summaries? I will say about this one, this kind of comedy is, in my opinion, the hardest type of book to write successfully, which certainly doesn't make me any less conflicted about reading it. Under the Eye of Big Bird, an inviting speculative novel about the future in which humans are nearing extinction, from the best-selling author of Strange Weather in Tokyo. In the distant future, humans are on the verge of extinction and have settled in small tribes across the planet under the observation and care of the mothers. Some children are made in the factory from cells of rabbits and dolphins. Some live by getting nutrients from water and light, like plants. The survival of the race depends on the interbreeding of these and other alien beings, but is far from certain that connections, love, reproduction, and evolution will persist among the inhabitants of this faltering new world. Unfolding over geological eons, Under the Eye of the Big Bird is at once an astonishing vision of the end of our species as we know it, and a meditation on the qualities that, for better and worse, make us humans. This sounds weird, and would you expect anything else from Harumi Murakami? This kind of speculative dystopian novel is another hard genre to successfully write. I always say that the test of a long list is in the reading of it, but every book so far is a book I'm confused about whether I want to read it or not, so that might be extra true for this long list. Hunchback. A literary phenomenon in Japan, Hunchback is an extraordinary and thrilling debut novel about sex, disability, and power. Born with a congenital muscle disorder, Sheikha has severe spine curvature and uses an electronic wheelchair and ventilator. Within the limits of her care home, her life is lived online. She studies, she tweets indignantly, she posts outrageous stories on an erotica website. One day, a new male carer reveals he has read it all: the sex, the provocation, the dirt. Her response is an indecent proposal. Hunchback is an extraordinary, thrilling glimpse into the desire and darkness of a woman placed at humanity's edge. The first book that I predicted on this long list, and one that I am really, really looking forward to reading. But going along with the theme of this long list so far, you have to acknowledge that this book is throwing some pretty big punches, and we won't know if they connect until we read the novel. And it's another book we are still awaiting the release of. Small Boat, November 2021. An inflated dinghy carrying migrants from France to the UK capsizes in the Channel, causing the death of 22 people on board. How and why did this happen? Despite receiving numerous calls for help, the French authorities wrongly told the migrants they were in British water and had to call the British authorities for help. By the time rescue vessels arrived on the scene, all but 2 of the migrants had died. The narrator is the woman who took the call. Accused of failing in her duty, she refuses to be held more responsible than others for this disaster. Why should she be more responsible than the sea, than the war, than the crisis behind these tragedies? A shocking moral tale of our time. Small Boat reminds us of the power of fiction to illuminate our darkest crimes. Very interesting point of view for this novel, and a lot of potential, and a book I don't really feel conflicted about at all. But the reviews of this by French readers are frankly terrible. Although one does have to wonder, is this political or literary based? This is another one not getting released until the end of April, and that's the 3rd book so far, and this is a particularly disappointing part of this year's long list. Now I'm going to say this very bluntly: Booker Prize pull your head out of your ass on this issue. Us readers frequently disagree on books, but nobody disagrees on this. It is just plain stupid marketing and publicity, and it is gatekeeping books from readers. Seriously, just change the rules, do better. Reservoir bitches. Life's a bitch. That's why you've got to rattle her cage, even if she's foaming at the mouth. A linked short story collection of gritty, streetwise, and wickedly funny fiction from Mexico. In the linked stories of Reservoir Bitches, 13 women prod the bitch that is life as they fight, sew, cheat, cry, and lie their way through their tangled circumstances. From the all-powerful daughter of a cartel boss to the victim of transfemicide, from a household of spinster seamstresses to a socialite who supports her political husband by faking indigenous roots, these women spit on their own reduction and invent new ways to survive, telling their story in bold, unapologetic voices, at once social critique and black comedy. Reservoir Bitches is a raucous debut from one of Mexico's most thrilling new writers. Another one I predicted, and if this is half as good as it sounds, it will be one of my favourite reads of this year. A description that isn't ambiguous at all. I'm really looking forward to this one. Solenoid. Solenoid submerges us in a mundane detail of a diarist's life and then spirals into bizarre existential accounts of history, philosophy, and mathematics. Grounded in the reality of communist Romania, the novel grapples with frightening healthcare, the absurdities of the education system, and the struggles of family life, while investigating other universes and forking paths. In a surreal journey like no other, we visit a tuberculosis preventorium, an anti-death protest movement, a society of dream investors, and a minuscule world of dust mites living on a microscope slide. Solenoid searches for the escape route through the alternative dimensions of life and art, as various monstrous realities erupt within the present. This is probably the most obvious book on the long list, although it does kind of feel like the odd one out. On a long list full of short books, this one has over 800 pages, and if you've been on this channel for a hot minute, you will know that surrealist magical realism is really not my thing. But it's not something that the judges have gone for on the other novels longlisted too. I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing for this book coming to the shortlist or naming a winner, but as far as reading it goes, I always think that positive reviews from people who don't love the genre of the book is a really positive thing, and a lot of people are loving this book right now. There's a monster behind the door. In 1980s Reunion, monsters lurk beneath the surface of a vibrant island life, ready to pounce at the slightest disturbance. La Reunion in the 1980s, a place of high unemployment and low social expectation, the legacy of post-colonialism. Here, a little girl makes a bid for escape from her sadistic parents' reign of terror and turns to school for salvation. The name DeSantis is one to recognize with. A bombastic, violent, and increasingly dangerous clan. Little do they know that their downfall is being chronicled by one of their own, rich in the history of island custom and superstition and driven by a wild, offbeat humour. This picturesque tale manages to satirise the very notion of freedom available in this French territory, and perhaps even the act of writing itself and where it might lead you. Another week, another long list for this book. First the Republic of Consciousness, now the Booker International. I am quite interested in reading this one, and I do love it when multiple book prizes love on a book. That's usually a very positive sign. On the calculation of volume, Tara has slipped out of time. Every morning she wakes up to the 18th of November. She no longer expects to wake up on the 19th of November, and she no longer remembers the 17th of November as if it were yesterday. She comes to know the shape of the day like the back of her hands. The grey morning light in the Paris hotel, the moment a blackbird breaks into song, her husband's surprise at seeing her return home unannounced. But for everyone around her, this day is lived for the first and only time. They do not remember the other 18th of November. They do not believe her when she tries to explain. And as Tara approaches her 365th 18th of November, she can't shake the feeling that somewhere underneath the surface of this day, there's a way to escape. On the Calculation of Volume is the first book in a planned septology. 5 books have been published in Danish so far, with translations underway in over 20 countries. I really love the story of this book. Self-published in Denmark and slowly becoming a runaway success. And now it's on the Booker International Longlist. It feels like a real rags to riches story. This is the last book that I predicted for the long list, but it's another book I can see going either way. But again, I feel much more confident about enjoying this one. However, it is another book yet to be released. The Book of Disappearance. What if all the Palestinians in Israel simply disappeared one day? What would happen next? How would Israelis react? These unsettling questions are posed in this powerful, imaginative novel. I don't need to read any more of the summary. That's an interesting enough premise to want to instantly read this book. Very excited. But for those of you who want to know a little bit more, I'll continue. Allah is haunted by his grandmother's memories of being displaced from Jaffa and becoming a refugee in her homeland. Ariel, Allah's neighbour and friend, is a liberal Zionist, critical of the military occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, yet faithful to the project of Israel. When he wakes up one morning to find that all Palestinians have suddenly vanished, Ariel begins searching for clues to the secret of their collective disappearance. The search and Ariel's reaction to it immediately reveal the fissures at the heart of the Palestinian question. Between the stories of Allah and Ariel are the people of Jaffa and Tel Aviv, cafe patrons, radio commentators, flower cutters, against whose ordinary lives these fissures and questions play out. Spare yet evocative, intensely intelligent in its interplay of perspective. The Book of Disappearance was critically acclaimed in its original Arabic. It is an unforgettable glimpse into contemporary Palestine as it grapples with both the memories and the loss of memory. Well, that's the 13 books, and I would call myself cautiously optimistic about this long list. About half the list sounds wonderful. The other half of the list sounds slightly risky, or more than slightly risky, but potentially wonderful. Other than the issues that I have around the release date, which I certainly don't blame the judges for, I would say that this is the most excited I've ever been for a Booker International long list. Hunchback, Reservoir Bitches and the Book of Disappearance stand out to me. On the Calculation of Volume has some real potential, and finally, On a Woman's Madness sounds fantastic too. These are the books that I am most interested in reading. Maybe I'll read a couple of these titles with my patrons, who I'd love to thank for all of their support. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are on this long list in the comment section. Bye bye.